This episode is sponsored by Realtor.com, who wants you to take advantage of your free profile on Realtor.com. By claiming and completing your free profile, adding a photo, and all of the information that puts you head and shoulders above the competition, you're on your way to receiving free leads, helping search engines find you, and staying top of mind with past clients. To learn more about claiming your free profile, go to Realtor.com/profile.
Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Real View podcast. I am your host, Allison Wiley. Joining me today, our special guest is Trista Curzidlo. She is an attorney and an educator with C4 Consulting, LLC. She is also one of our 2024 convention speakers. She is going to be joining us at our convention this year, happening September 9th through 11th. In Columbus, Ohio, at the Convention Center and the Hyatt Hotel. Trista, welcome onto the show. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. And you got my last name. You didn't need to ask.
Okay, I have to tell the truth on this one. So when I have tough last names, I go and Google how to pronounce them, and I listen to the pronunciation. And I memorize the pronunciation in my head to make sure that I get it right. So I'm glad that worked.
Awesome. That is awesome. And such a great way to use that AI that exists out there to make sure that you're not like upsetting someone or offending someone. That's amazing. That's exactly what it's there for.
Oh, well, I'm glad I got it right, because it always makes me nervous. And usually I just ask our director of meetings, Gary, who runs and gets all of our CE speakers and coordinates all that. I would just go over to his office and say, hey, how do I pronounce this? But he's not here this week. So I had to rely on my good friend Google, and it did not let me down. So I'm glad about that.
That's awesome.
Well, welcome onto the show. And we're super happy to be having you and be hearing a little bit about what you're going to dive into at convention for us in this world of lawsuits and litigation and what we've all been living in the past, however many months now since the settlement news broke and other, cases have came up, and we're still dealing with old stuff and just so much to get into. But before we get going, I would like to hear a little bit more about yourself, how you got started in this industry, and give us a little peek into your career background.
All right. Well, when you break it down, like in writing, like on my resume, I'm like, it looks like I just can't hold down a job. Like if my mom reads it as opposed to someone else, I'm like, oh yeah. So I have been an attorney for actually what is now half of my life. So I graduated in 2000 from Washburn, which is a law school here in Kansas. And I was so lucky. My very first job as a practicing attorney, I was legal counsel to our governor, which is kind of starting at the tippity top that you can. It was such like a fluke that worked out with timing, and the right person had read my law journal article and the stars aligned. And so I always think back to the years that I spent there because I got to see the why behind laws. Why do we have this? What went wrong? What did someone do that made the legislature or Congress decide we got to act? And so whenever I look at a real estate law now, I always think back to that. And I'm like, okay, what happened? Who did something that made them do this? So I always look at the why from that. And then I became a lobbyist. And that was really the how did this law get passed? Because, there is a lot that goes into that. And then I became the lobbyist for the Realtors Association. And there was a year in there where I was a prosecutor for it was in the fraud division. And so I got to see kind of the impact of the enforcement side of some of those laws that regulate real estate. And then I joined the Realtor family, and I was legal counsel for an association, and I was also a government affairs director. And so I kind of feel like I've covered like the whole realm of why we have the law, how the law was passed, how the law is enforced. And now I get to see kind of the how do we explain to agents and realtors that the law is there. It is not there to harm you. It's actually there for a reason. And then how do we implement it into their practice? So my background, when you think about it, kind of long term makes sense. But when you just spit it all out, it's like, whoa, that is a journey. Yeah.
Quite the journey. No, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, what an incredible career you've been able to achieve. And what better person to be talking to us about this than you? I mean, just from learning a little bit more about you and your background, sounds like you just have a really good understanding of this world, of our industry. You've seen it from all different angles, which I think that gives you a really unique perspective, you know?
Yeah. I actually have a for sale sign in my yard right now. We are in the midst of contract negotiations. And my husband, who's also an attorney, he seems to think that this is like his big opportunity to like apply 25 years of legal practice. And I'm like, no, this is not the time for that. But it's been really interesting for me because I like the law. Like, I think it's really interesting. And I know that not a lot of people do. So those people who think it's really boring and they just want the nuts and bolts, I try to reach everyone with the like, this is cool, but also walk out this door today and do this because this is what you need to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. And the reality is, in today's day and world, you can't ignore it or you can't not pay attention to it, right? Like whether you like it or not, whether it's your thing, whether you're going to read up on it every day, you need to have some spotlight on this and at least paying attention to it, especially with what's going on nowadays. So, if you don't like it, if it's not your jam, I think it's more important now maybe than ever before to start being more cognizant of it and really putting a spotlight and highlighting, what's going on every day.
And it's one of those things, I feel like in the last year, there have been a series of cases, not just the big antitrust one, but a series of cases. And people have said, I'll be in a class and they'll be like, where did this come from? And I'm like, you've probably been hearing about it for years, but you have ignored it because it hasn't been this is happening and this is when. It's always been a may or could or potentially. And really, I'm discovering a lot of people need a deadline. Like on this day, your world will change. And until you have a day, there's not a lot of interest. And I get that they have so many other things going on, so many other things to worry about. And having an attorney come and kind of doomsday your day is not fun. But it's one of those where I just want people to start thinking now. Like, we're going to talk about a lawsuit, and it doesn't have a lot to do with real estate immediately. It involves like the National Eating Disorders Association. But they're using AI, and this is how they're using AI, and it's not going well for them. So can we learn from how it's not going well for non-real estate people? Yes. Does that mean that we implement changes based on what somebody else is in trouble for? Absolutely. And then if we start looking at litigation that's out there and we start making changes today, then there's not going to be a scary deadline in your future where you have your version of Trista coming in and saying, on this day, it's a total shift. Instead, we already made that gradual change and we've already acclimated to that gradual change. And so there's not a big, scary, life-altering shift.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to make is that we can get ahead of this, right? Like we are not going to have to be in this place where we're playing catch up and now we're having to adjust based on new court cases, that you're saying that there is a way that we can learn and we can take a look at our existing practices and we can get ahead of it so that we're not in the situation in the future.
Absolutely. There's an instructor out there, and I can't remember who it is, and I wish I remember her name, but she teaches a class, Shift Happens.
Yes.
It always makes me laugh when I see it. And I'm like, it does happen. It happens daily where you have to change how you're doing something because you need to make that change for whatever reason. And I've discovered, especially with my current move situation, I don't mind moving. It doesn't, it is what it is. It's, it's best for everybody that's around me. But I've discovered that not everybody that lives in my house agrees. There is a lot of, no, I don't want change. No, like, mom, no, like I have my routine. And what if we're moving 3 hours away, where will I get my coffee? Where will I get my this? Well, change means we look for new places and we look for new interactions. And so it's kind of one of those, yes, you like your hairstylist here. That's awesome. You might find one that you like even better that works better for you. So we need to look at what's out there. We need to accept that some things change.
Yeah, and that it's not always a bad thing, right? I think so many people are so, in the mindset that they coordinate change with like a negative thing, and it can be positive in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah. And everything changes every day. And so whenever I teach a class and I talk about when you leave here today, I want you to make these changes. I always want it to be a gradual where you see, oh, there's this case out there. And like the next round, I think the next round of antitrust is actually going to stem from a really fascinating series of cases involving RealPage, and which is rental. It's rental property management. And people are always like, oh, I don't do property management. And I'm like, oh, wait until you hear it's not a property management case, it's an algorithm case. Are you using algorithms in your business? Are you using them when you go in and you're doing a broker's price opinion, or when you go into a listing appointment? Are you doing an algorithm to come up with a suggested price point? Because this is an algorithm case, and let's look at the algorithm. And then I want them to leave feeling empowered to ask questions. Okay, so this technology exists. It's an algorithm, it's a program. How does this algorithm get its brain? Where does this information come from? Is this getting into that RealPage territory where I should be concerned and I need to really think about how this is going to impact, what can be the negatives? And it's this way with kind of all of technology. I remember 15 years ago talking about social media and people being like so overwhelmed with what social media was, and oh, it was so scary. And Facebook, well, Facebook is a lot, and all of your social media, and now leading into AI, it can do so much stuff. But the problem is you may not do everything it can because law regulates it, and law regulates what realtors do differently than how the law regulates like what car salesmen do. And so you have to look at it and say, oh, this technology is so cool. This tool is so neat, but I'm regulated by all this real estate law stuff. So I need to apply real estate law. And I think that's kind of an eye opener for some people because they're so used to, I need to be told. Well, these tools change so quickly. No, you're going to have to figure it out, not on your own, but you need to have the tools in front of you so you can start applying and saying, oh, there's a lawsuit about this. I need to be a little concerned.
Yeah. And that's exactly, one of the reasons why we're having you here. And I just had another conversation with Craig Grant, who is also one of our convention
Yes.
speakers. And he was talking about the same thing. He was saying, you don't have to be the expert on everything, but you do have to give things attention. You do have to learn from the experts, right? So this is a perfect case of that.
Yes. Craig is so funny. He always makes me laugh, but he cracks me up because he'll be going off on something and I'm like, that's really cool, but it's so illegal. He's like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. And I'm like, yeah, illegal. Wrong.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things, like he talks about, like the first time he ever was in my class, he's like, I was terrified. I wanted to quit. And I was like, I'm really sorry that I felt, you felt that way, but clearly it was because you needed to be in my class.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not something to be afraid of. It's something that you want to be on top of so that you can prevent yourself from potential risks and potential issues that could come up in the future. I mean, any smart business person is going to want to get ahead of this so that we're not in the position where we are right now.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things like, so I have two daughters, 19 and 15, and my 19-year-old and I were having this conversation and I was like, why did you do that? Why didn't you talk to me first? And she's like, oh, mom, I thought it would be easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And I think a lot of people are like that, where they're like, oh, I don't really know if I should do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. And then I'll just ask for forgiveness. Or if I get caught or if something goes wrong, I'll figure it out. Those gray areas, no, it is permission first, where I need to figure it out. Is this the path I want to travel? Is this the way that I want to do this? And then we're gonna listen to if permission is granted or not. And when I say permission, I mean, is this okay? Is this an effective tool? I have another course at convention about reasonable accommodations. And I'm like, your response on once you get that request is so important. And so it's kind of one of those, is what I'm saying what I need to be saying, or do I need to keep my mouth shut and do some research and then come back with what I know is the right response?
This episode of The Real View is brought to you by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. Ohio's network of community colleges provides accessible training that accommodates the busy lifestyles of aspiring real estate professionals at half the price of a traditional university. With convenient locations in every part of the state, as well as online options, Ohio's community colleges are your smart choice for pre-licensing education. For more details or to start the journey to a real estate career, visit the education page at ohiorealtors.org and then click on the pre-license course locations.
Yeah, 100%. And I know I've heard, Katie Johnson on her video updates and webinar updates, and she says a million times, if you're thinking of ways to get around something, then like you're already violating what you need to be doing.
So in selling our house and with my husband's negotiating, which is super fun, then we're buying a house hours and hours away. The market there, very different than the market here. Our realtor there, totally different than our realtor here. And we asked a question of her, and she's like, well, realtors don't really like to hear no. We'll figure out a workaround. And it wasn't like we're asking, can we break the law or anything like that. It was a timing issue. Just to be clear, nobody was leading anyone astray, but it was how quickly she's like, realtors don't like to hear no. We'll figure out a workaround. And I think that is immediately what comes to a lot of people's mind. When you say you have to change, it's, I don't want to, so I'm going to figure out how can I keep doing what I want to do, but in a way that I'm not necessarily going to be in trouble. And that's just not where you want to be. You want to be like, oh, okay, here's an opportunity for my business practice to change. It might be rough for a little bit, but it could turn out to be really for the better. Like this could be like a good change. And I think everybody in their lives at some point has had something big happen, professional, personal, whatever, COVID, and we all had to make huge changes. So my policy in the practice of law and when it comes to educating pre-COVID was I never did anything online. I hated it. I don't like how I look on video. I don't like watching myself. I think my teeth are weird. I already commented on my eyebrows today. I don't like that. COVID made me change. It made me start using this technology. And when it made me make that change, I started to see, I don't have to leave my house. I don't have to wear pants. things can be better. I can do this. And if I adopt it, then it's going to be much easier in the long run for me if I just make the changes I need to make now. And so I didn't jump in right away at all. It was toe in, and then I waded in to get comfortable. And now I'm like, this is a tool that I can effectively use. So, yeah, I have client meetings using the technology that I originally said I would never, ever use. And it has made my life so much easier. So it's really when we look at the big changes, our big deadlines coming up, you're going to have to look at this and say, okay, this is here. I got to do this. What does this mean for me? And so does this mean my practice is going to be better because I'm going to spend more time with my buyers explaining things? And so they come into it a little more educated. Does this mean that my conversations with my sellers are going to be a little different? And that means I'm spending more time creating a rapport with them. And that rapport is important because we're talking about my level of expertise and not just paint colors and all of that stuff.
And that's exactly the perspective, I hope most people can take out of this is, hey, this is going to ultimately make you better. This is going to strengthen those relationships. This is going to strengthen who you are, as a realtor, and as a top-notch professional in your job. Like this is really it's existing just to make us better. And whether you like the changes or not, I hope that people really walk away with that perspective and hope that they see that perspective, as we inch closer to, the settlement changes going into effect. And that's what I hope, at least, is that people can see that as
Oh, yeah.
positive.
And I don't just talk about antitrust. Like there
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah,
so many other antitrust, I hope is going to be like the end. Like I hope it's like the last, kind of because there are so many other like big changes. So like the Federal Trade Commission issued new rules on the use of testimonials. And think how many testimonials are used by realtors. And we need to know what the new rules are. We need to know if I'm going to put a testimonial on my website, the rules have changed from where we were 5 years ago when that set of rules was unveiled. And I want us to look at how the Federal Trade Commission enforced those in some cases that are fun, like the Kardashians gotten a little bit of, there's a little spiciness there, but there's also like the Federal Trade Commission versus Roomster. And so that's real estate specific case that we need to look at when it comes to, am I falsely inflating my popularity on websites, on social media? Am I having someone like my 15-year-old daughter or the assistant in my office create fake Zillow accounts so they can have multiple saves so that it looks like my property is much more popular than my property really is out there? What does that look like when we look at Federal Trade Commission versus Roomster? So not just antitrust, we've got AI, we've got FTC, and we have copyright. I think we will always have copyright cases. The last 2 years have been really exciting in copyright world for realtors because we have two conflicting cases that deal with floor plans. And Ohio, you are in neither of the districts that has weighed in. But Allison, you can't see Allison, but she's like, yay, we're not
in. Say, don't speak too soon.
way too soon, because that means, and the reason we need to know about both cases is when a case like this shows up in, I think, your sixth district. So when it shows up in your district, they're going to look at, are we going to follow our peers in the eighth, or are we going to follow our peers in the fifth? And that is going to be a huge kind of change for you on if I use a floor plan that was created by a tool, or if I use a floor plan that I created with my grid paper and my pencil. What do I need to do to make sure that I'm not infringing on an architect's copyright protection? Because for so long, we didn't think about it. We thought about floor plans being copyright protected when they were coming from the architect, meaning they were on their special blue paper that was huge and you'd roll it out. And when we talk about architect protected works now, we are talking about, did I have a bot go in and measure out and take pictures and create a floor plan that way? And if my bot did that, am I potentially violating that copyright for that architectural rendering? So good stuff.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's what I think, is important to point out too, is that like if you are so wrapped up in what's been happening with the changes from the antitrust settlement from the big Sitzer Burnett case, what you're saying is this is not this the end. Like we are not just going to settle this case and we don't have to worry about lawsuits anymore, right? Like
No, that would be so great. And I would be so unemployed and I'd have so much free time on my hands. And I would go back and I would get whatever education I need to become. I'm thinking a plumber or HVAC. I think that's where I truly belong. But I feel like the antitrust cases have cast a shadow over so many other things in real estate. And so I want to bring light to some of those changes because they are coming so fast and we need to be making changes to the way that we practice. And so I have been my youngest daughter has discovered Zillow. No 15-year-old on earth needs Zillow at all. And so she sends me kind of her like, it's almost a daily top 5. And so like yesterday, it was top 5 virtual staging errors. And so she's sending them to me. And it was like facepalm time because there was no disclosure that virtual staging had happened. Was it very obvious that there was virtual staging? Yes. When you have a kitchen that has 3 refrigerators and no stove, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so she's sending these to me and I'm like, these are awesome. They're so great, but they're so wrong. They're so wrong. And that's a conversation that we have in this class as well, is how do I approach disclosures when it comes to my virtual staging, as well as if I'm using AI. And a couple of days ago, she sent me best AI generated property descriptions.
Oh gosh.
They were so good. And I'm reading like 28 paragraphs. Like I did not know you could put that much in an MLS listing description of a property. And then I'm comparing the property description to the pictures of the property. And it doesn't match. It's not right. There's so many things that are wrong. And I'm like, oh, so we cover that as well. If we're going to use AI to give us a little help when it comes to property descriptions, or if we're going to use AI to give us a little help if we want to write an article for a blog or an article on our website, what do we do when it comes to making sure AI is right? Because AI is not always accurate.
No, and to think that, if you're going to give it a prompt and it's going to spit out, whatever you asked it to, and then you can go ahead and just use that without taking a second set of eyes on it or editing it. And that's scary.
Or just double checking that it's accurate. Because
Yeah.
like I can read the AI generated article and be like, oh, this is a lot of repetitive words. This isn't working. But then I also need to look at it and be like, if I asked it to do a summary of pending legislation, are those real bills that it is summarizing? If I ask it to do a summary of litigation, is it actually summarizing the litigation? And my older sister is a college professor, and AI, oh my goodness, we probably have a weekly conversation about where she's like, I love AI for what it does for me to help me prepare. I hate AI for what it is forcing me to read today, because this student had AI do a summary of a series of law journal articles. And she's like, I'm very familiar with what these law journal articles say. And I'm like, well, yeah, one of them was written by me and I talk about it all the time. So of course, and she's like, I know what they say. I know the cases that they are, covering. She's like, this article is wrong. Like it is wrong. The findings are wrong. The justice that it is quoting was not sitting on the court when this case was decided. I know this because, it's my second, only my sister would have like top 5 favorite Supreme Court justices, but she does. And she's like, Sally was not on the court then. And so she does, the breakdown, and she's like, it's just wrong. And so when she calls the student in, and the student's like, yeah, I used AI. And she's like, the information's wrong. I'm not mad that you used this tool. I'm mad that you didn't go through and at least demonstrate to me that you knew what the articles were about. You knew how the court had rendered this decision. You knew what this was. And she's like, I'm fine with you using AI to help you start a conversation. I'm fine with you using it as an effective tool. I'm frustrated when you're letting AI be wrong and then you are wrong. And so if I'm going to have AI do a summary of litigation, and then I'm going to put that on my website, and I'm going to say upcoming changes in real estate, and it's wrong, guess who's responsible for that? You are. Even if you put little language at the bottom saying this is generated by AI, we have almost every state has a republication rule where you are then responsible for that republication. So it's just not.
Yep.
No, especially if it's defamatory, if you're, citing someone, or if you're making a reference to someone and that's not awesome or what happened, it's bad.
Yeah, always important to fact check whether you're dealing with AI, especially with AI and in everything else that you might do. But I want to thank you so much for joining me here today and for sharing such an insightful look into what we have to deal with in this world of real estate law, what we have to look forward to not look forward to, and how we can get in front of it, right? I really think that that's the message that you hope to share with everybody, is that there is a way that we can get in front of this. If we're paying attention and keeping a close eye on things, we can make sure that we are safe and risk-free. So thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you so much.
And we can't wait to see you at convention.
Yay!
And to all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to register for convention. You'll get to hear from Trista. She has 2 amazing sessions. She's going to dive way more into this world, into more than what we just talked about here today. So register now, ohiorealtors.org/convention, and we will talk to you all next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.